Hi, I'm Ellie. I Can Relate, a podcast by teens, for teens, and about teens, is made possible by the generosity of Lisa McCares. Lisa McCares is a nonprofit coalition organization focused on promoting healthy behaviors and activities for youth and families. I Can Relate is produced by Fredcasts. Think, speak, act.
Welcome to I Can Relate. This is a podcast by teens, for teens, and about teens. I'm Charlie. I'm a junior.
Maieva.
We should have went over that.
Yeah, you go.
I'm Connor. I'm a senior.
And I'm Maieva, and I'm also a senior.
Today we wanted to talk about book bannings. It has been a practice that has spread throughout the country, kind of appeared a little bit in Missouri, but not by much, surprisingly enough. When I was a freshman, I read this book called Roma, a Novel of Ancient Rome by Stephen Saylor. It is the book that made me fall in love with Roman history. And I had recommended it to a lot of people. It was a legitimately good book. It was also a book that had a lot of sex scenes. Those scenes had a purpose, but I always had the fear in the back of my mind that some admin was going to read it and get ticked off. So the next year, I'd met this buddy who was also fascinated by Roman history, and I recommended the book to him because it's what got me into the whole thing. And a while after that, I looked for the book, just curious, in the library catalog, and it wasn't there. The thoughts going through my mind were, the school's done it, they've stepped out of line, and I was entirely ready to go to war with the school board about this one book. So I finally got around to asking the head librarian about it, and what she told me was that it hadn't been banned. It was just phased out because of lack of space in what the new library was going to be, which is equally sad. That book was, again, very important to me. But my point is the idea of it being banned to make some sort of terrible point was horrendous enough to me, regardless of what actually happened.
I mean, I feel like, for me, I think it's really unfair, especially, since that was your first thought. It wasn't just like, oh, well, it may have, they might not have enough space, but your first thought was a book banning and how it's really, a relevant topic, but I feel like not that many people, a lot of people overlook it as a real problem.
Yeah, and it's kind of scary, because I got into reading sophomore year, freshman yearish, and then not a lot of my books are what you would deem books that would probably get banned, and especially books I read in my IB English class. And a lot of them were really informative, and some of the stuff I learned from the books I still think about today. And it's kind of just ridiculous that now our first thought is when a book goes missing is that it was banned. It's kind of what was the history thing where they started burning books?
That happened a lot.
Oh, yeah.
The Holocaust?
I think it was kind of just everywhere around that time.
Nazi Germany did
Yeah.
do that a lot. There is this exhibit in Berlin. There is this glass pane in the ground. I believe it's at Brandenburg Gate. And underneath that glass pane is a set of empty bookcases. You cannot enter this room, but you look down, standing in the middle of the symbol of all of Germany. Standing in the middle of that, you look down and you see empty bookcases, because that was the exact spot where a bunch of Nazi leaders had banned books that the government didn't like.
I think it's I just think it's really unfair for especially our younger youth, because I also did read some books in IB English, and it gave me a whole different perspective on how how they live their life and how their culture is that I just would never have experienced without a book. And I mean, I just feel like them banning books in general, it's just a very like big problem because it feels like they're trying to shape our learning and shape
Yeah.
like what we are able to learn and reach out on.
Yeah, and also, it's kind of like like shaping our thoughts. It's also like hindering our creativity and also our ability to have a broad, open mind and like open thinking and stuff, which is kind of like a double standard because they teach us in school to be open minded, to be open to new things, to have out of the box thinking, but then they want to go ban books that'll help us do that.
It is the great hypocrisy of this country that we pride ourselves on individual freedom and standing for personal rights of freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. We say all these things, and we, for some reason, naively say that no other country has this. And then we turn around and destroy those freedoms to make, again, a terrible point.
And they're doing it just like little by little,
Yeah.
a little new constitution here, a little one there, and then eventually there's no freedom of speech at all.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like taking away news articles or turning down news just because we don't want to see it, or they don't want us to see it, or they don't want us to hear it.
Yeah.
Just because it's, history or a perspective on somebody else's point of view, it shouldn't be taken away from us.
Mm-hmm. And what we also have to remember is that this isn't just happening in school libraries, public libraries all over the country. This has been happening in. Chief librarians have been ousted by residents of a city for being queer or for keeping books that these people wanted to ban. They were ousted and replaced by someone loyal to the cause who would remove those books.
Yeah, and I also saw that in Texas, they closed an entire school's library just for it to be a concentration center. And like they got rid of all the books and everything in there, and there's no more books in the school.
That's what they want.
I feel like that shouldn't even be like allowed because at the end of the day, it's still your right to it's like taking away the First Amendment where it's just like you're losing that ability and you have no control over it, and we pride ourselves on freedom, like Charlie said.
Yeah.
And like as much as this is like affecting people who read books, it's also affecting authors because they can't really get their books out, or now they're having to like overthink, oh, is this going to get banned and all that stuff.
Well, yes, but it's also a very funny fact that book bannings are when book sales are at their highest.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like the sucky part of it is with book bannings, like you have to pay for it now to read it. Like,
yeah.
You can't just go to your library or go to your school library to get it because it's not there because someone or few individuals felt like it was not deserved to be in
that space. Yeah. Also, and then a lot of these people that are doing the book banning are adults. I'm not going to call that anyone, but stay-at-home wives. And we also have the Lovers of Liberty down in Florida trying to ban books like all over Florida.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like ridiculous how it's them making decisions for us, but then it's affecting us and we don't even have a say in anything.
Well, that's the thing. Sorry.
It's just pretty typical being a teenager in America.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. It's like it should be our choice on what we want to discover through a book, and not just because they're older than us. That's just not fair. Because at the end of the day, a library you get to pick what you want to read, not somebody else take that away from you.
Did you guys have that thing where at the beginning of you entering high school or middle school or whatever, your English class would go to the library and your librarians would read out the Reader's Bill of Rights to you? You never had the Reader's Bill of Rights?
No.
I never did.
The rights of a reader?
Nope.
Mm-mm.
Okay, well, it was all saying stuff like you can't be judged by what you read. You can't judge other people by what you read. You can skip pages. You can choose to drop a book altogether. It was things you're allowed to do as a reader, because no one should be stopping you. And it feels like these things that I personally have been taught from the very beginning, this idea that I can read what I want to read, is being removed because some people, a very loud minority of people, are petty. They're childish. They never learned to grow up.
They didn't. They picked it up. Sorry. Anyways, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is, like, kind of going back a little bit to, like, the Holocaust and stuff, like, their government took those books away because they disagreed with their beliefs. And, I mean, we're supposed to be, like, country of freedom, and you're taking away that ability, like, to understand, because, I mean, when I was taking IB English, like, people understood and, like, took books, like, differently than, like, everybody else. Like, you could read a line of text and take it completely differently than somebody else. And, I mean, you're just taking away that, and you're not even giving the opportunity for somebody to even have those thoughts or even just, like, understand it.
A lot of these bannings have been centered around removing books about LGBTQ characters, LGBTQ history, because of the fact that if you are a queer person who is discovering yourself, it's going to be a lot harder for you to do that if you cannot find a book with a character you can relate to. They are removing people's ability to feel comfortable in their own skin, to relate to characters, find somewhere to say, hey, I feel this way and it's all right. Because these people who are doing the banning are terrified of change, terrified of losing control over people, their children, and the children of others who should have the ability to decide for themselves.
Yeah, it's also the problem of, like, they're trying to control everyone's kid instead of focusing on their own.
Yeah.
And it's like, some of these stuff, this is like a private family matter that should be going on between, like, parents and their child. Like, you can read this, you can't read this, or I don't want you reading this till, like, a certain age and stuff, which is, like, understandable for families. But it's just kind of ridiculous that they're trying to control a whole mass of children, which is, like, we see this in the government, Roe v. Wade, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, this is kind of a stretch, but it's like a phone. Like, you're not going to say somebody can't have a phone until, like, high school or middle school. Like, that's their own decision. Like, that's their parents' decision.
Yeah. Do you want to start with the history videos and then okay. I think this all is centered around the idea of whitewashing history, something that has been going on since the Reconstruction period after the Civil War, was people banning books or replacing them with books that make a certain point, tell a particular myth. For example, with the Civil War, this thing that has been touted since the Civil War was the lost cause myth, the idea that the Civil War had nothing to do with slavery, that it was fought about states' rights or taxes and tariffs or whatever the hell else they could pull out of their butts. It is a fact that the Civil War was fought about slavery. The South seceded because of slavery. But these books are being banned or controlled for saying otherwise. Florida had a series of videos recently released that talked about stuff like how slaves were well treated, they liked their jobs, or whatever else, completely just out of any sense of reason, but they don't care about reason. They don't care about fact. They care about making a point.
Yeah, and one of the videos I saw online was about, like, Christopher Columbus and when he came and, like, enslaved all the Native Americans. And the video kind of, like, paused and, like, started talking to the kids. Well, I didn't know this was a bad thing. They did it all around the world, and it was normal to me during the time. So, I mean, I thought it was okay to do it to them, too. And it was, like, also him saying, like, they needed my help and stuff like that. trying to give that like savior complex and stuff, and that they needed us, which they really didn't. And
Yeah.
which is kind of what they're trying to do to like everything to make it seem like we or America, white people, needed to be there for everything.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I recently watched this TED talk in my English class about it was about someone native to Africa coming to the United States for college, and her not having like very much access to um, like books that actually represented her culture, but represented it as like, oh, they're so poor, like they are starving every day. But in reality, like it's more like the US and more like a normal kind of like lifestyle. And it talked about like her coming to America and rooming with somebody who was from the United States, and they completely went into like a savior complex and like a oh you I and didn't even realize how like similar they were to each other. And like she just I mean she even kind of after living in America for a couple of years did it with Mexico after visiting there. How it's kind of a different like perspective, and I just feel like eliminating books will just keep the one perspective of this is what this country is, this is what this country is.
It keeps telling this great lie that these people are so obsessed with, because they're terrified of the idea that they're wrong. They're terrified of the idea that their ancestors did these pretty crappy things because they believe that it means they're predestined to do these crappy things. Or, in another way, they just don't give a crap.
And it's like America loves to sit on the high seat and say that we're better than all these countries that controlled their citizens, but then they're doing it too. So, it's kind of just ridiculous with the double standard of like almost everything in America.
I mean, I feel like every country kind of honestly does that, especially like
First world country.
yeah, because I've talked to some people from like the UK and Great Britain, and I mean they even have this perspective of like the Civil War we had in our like revolution, not our Civil War. I'm sorry, the revolution. um, it as like that wasn't a bad loss and that wasn't that significant, even though I mean my personal opinion, I'm also American, so it's persuasive, is it's one of their worst losses in their entire country's history, but they just see it as like
A brush off.
yeah.
Because from a broader perspective, it didn't really affect the larger British colonial empire that much. Really, the true effects of America being independent wouldn't come until like World War One. I want to ask the audience right now a simple question. Give 3 reasons why America is the greatest country in the world. Some of you might answer by just repeating the word freedom 3 times. And that's wrong, because it implies that America is the only country with freedom. Every EU state, Canada, Mexico, most of the countries in Africa, a ton of other states, most of the world has freedom. It's not just us. It was never just us. We're not the greatest country in the world. We're not. We're plainly not. We have the highest incarcerated population in the world. Single highest. Where we have one of the highest impoverished rates in the world. But we can be great. We just have to stop doing things like book banning. We have to stop brushing off issues because we're scared to talk about what's real. We need to stop being so apathetic. We need to start doing more. We need to speak up. We need to talk more.
I definitely agree with that. I feel like one thing that we kind of overshadow as like a population in kind of like just country in general is we have so much voice, and we can use so much of our voice in one person starting it and more getting more and more people to start, especially book banning and getting rid of that and fighting against it. We have power in our government that I will agree a lot of countries are freedom. And I will say one of the biggest things, and a lot of other countries have this, is America can like fight against our government with our voice and with protesting, and especially book banning, which is a really big problem.
We have the right to assembly. We have the right to petition. Why shouldn't we use it?
Yeah, and you don't even have to like start too big. You can just start at your school board, go to one of the meetings, speak up about it, or a city board meeting or something like that, and speak up about it. Because I feel like recently our generation and just like everyone around the world has started realizing like the effect of like actually using your voice, speaking up. And there's so many more ways than one you can do that. Sign petitions, go to meetings, talk out, or just like talk to your friends about it, talk to your teachers, and like make sure that they know that we're seeing this and we're watching it, and that we don't agree with what they're doing. And you can just continue to speak up about it, because even if it's something you're not overly passionate about, like think about like your friends that might affect, and also like the future of this country, because it's probably it's gonna be like a big thing that if it actually like starts affecting libraries, it's not gonna like go well.
Well, like think of the bigger picture. Like think of your family in 20, 15, 20, 30, even 30 years, like when they're in your place and they are just geared and targeted towards learning what the government and learning what people, like higher people want, older people want, when even though they're not going to care in 30 years, but they shaped your kids' education. They shaped your kids' ability to learn and understand different cultures, which is really important, especially in the future coming up, where traveling is going to be easier and easier and cheaper and cheaper. And understanding how different people's point of views is really important, and they want to take that away from us.
Yeah. So we are not nearly close to an hour.
How much?
We're 21 minutes in.
It feels like 30.
And if they cut off all like the pause parts, it's gonna be like 15 minutes.
We are not doing a 15-minute episode.
Oh my gosh. Well, like we went through everything, and we even like sidetracked. Let's talk about Katy Perry, guys.
So, something interesting that's also happening is music artists. A lot of music artists like Katy Perry or Pink. I don't listen to either of them, but I know from this that they're pretty cool, because what they're doing is they've declared that they will be handing out banned books at their concerts. You could argue this is all just to get more people to come to the concerts, just to earn them more profit, which would make sense. This is a capitalistic system after all.
Amen.
But even still, it's good that it's happening, and I'd say that is pretty cool.
And even like, again, with like using your voice, it reaches them too, and they obviously have bigger platforms than we do. So them like showing their support for it is also important to like influence the bigger people.
Yeah.
Corporate.
Yeah, especially like, cause one of the best like books that I've ever read that honestly could probably get banned in the future and has, I believe, been talked about getting banned is The Kite Runner.
Yeah.
And I read that book, and it completely just flipped my perspective on the Middle East, because all the news and all this, it's just war, violence, and just like everybody's poor, just the government's rich, just people who work for the government is rich. That's my perspective of just what I've seen.
The Gaza conflict right now.
Yeah. And it's just like, just getting that perspective and kind of like what happened in like different just cultures. It just changed me. And then we read a lot more books just about other cultures, and it just allowed me to open my mind and allowed me to just have a different perspective that I wouldn't have seen if I didn't read the book. And if you ban those types of books, which I feel like those types of books are so much more important. Obviously, fantasy books, like one of my favorite books is Ready Player One.
I love that movie. Sorry.
I want to say the book.
Yeah.
But it kept me reading and reading and reading, but it's just a story. But
Mm.
when you get a story that is true, and I mean, even if it's just half true or based on a true story, it just means so much more because you take it away and you're like, wow, this person actually lived through this and and was brave enough to tell us this story, and it's just gonna get banned. And I just it just does not ever just sit right with me because I just feel like it's so unfair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I read a lot of fiction books, and even though they're like fiction or fantasy or mystery, there's still stuff to take away from it, and it
Yeah.
also like it just like sparks creativity because fantasy books it's also like fun to read because you're like escaping into a different world and stuff like that. And it's and some of these books I will say could get banned just because of some stuff in the books.
Yeah.
And but like books like these, fiction, nonfiction, biographies, and all like stuff like that, there's something to take from each and every one of them. Even a cartoon book for a kid, because there's just so much. There's so much in life to just keep learning and keep growing and like expanding your thoughts.
Um, I mean, even like going off of like, especially the fantasy books, because I'm not 100% sure, but I mean, I feel like in the future, especially if it gets like a really um, big issue, is they could start banning more of like fantasy books that aren't even real. And I read The Road in IB English, and it was made like was it early 2000s? I think
Yeah.
early 2000s, and it's not even true, but it's about a catastrophic event happening, and just like seeing the perspective of what an older generation thought of like what a catastrophic event would be is just like really interesting to think about, and I just feel like getting somebody's imagination and banning that and taking that away from the world is just really like unfair, even if it's not real, even if it's not a true story. It's still somebody's imagination, still somebody's artwork, and banning that
Yeah.
should just not be allowed.
It's un-American,
Yeah,
is what it is.
I mean, like Charlie said earlier in the episode, like we fight for freedom and then we take away freedom.
Me personally, I love to write. It's my passion. It's what I want to do in the future as a full-on career, and it's because of what I've read. It's because of what I've watched. I've watched shows like The West Wing, movies like Kingsman, The Secret Service, two polar opposite pieces of media, but they both influenced me heavily. The books I've read, Roma, got me to love historical epics. I read the entire Roma trilogy, which follows a family of Roman patricians from before Rome even existed as a city, all the way to when the empire's capital was moved from Roma to what we now call Istanbul, what was then Nova Roma, what was later called Constantinople. All because of seeing these things. It has influenced me as an amateur writer, a prospective writer. The paintings people see influence their own work as painters. It's not about just making a point. It's not about just being un-American. It's about art. Humans are a naturally artistic species. We love to create. It's why I think AI will never destroy a writer's job. Writers will just keep writing.
Yeah.
And I guess kind of a further point on that, I would say is just like you're kind of saying, you you can't take away somebody's creativity, which is genuinely just what you're doing. You're I mean, and people spend this is I mean, I just to get people to understand how big of an issue this is, I feel like you have to think of it as a different way because coming into this, I didn't really know much about book banning and its significance. But talking with you two, it's opened my mind up a lot because to me, just book banning is like, oh, it's just book banning. But then I hear like books that I've read are on the chopping block of getting banned, and I'm just like, how is that fair? And how you can't? I mean, you're not going to ban a painting. You're not going to ban a video game. You might put a maturity label on it, but you wouldn't ban it. And I mean,
they've tried.
yeah, I mean, you wouldn't ban movies. I mean,
They've tried.
Yeah,
The Hays Code.
but why are books different? Because when I read a book, in my imagination, it's a movie. It is going, gearing. Like, it's no different. Just words on paper instead of on a screen. You visualize it how you want to visualize it, and it's just a lot more significant than people are realizing. And if we are too late, we're going to be too late, and they're going to have too much control.
And it's also kind of like a thing of individuality, because everyone likes their own things, and everyone's different. Everyone like finds joy or happiness or like complex thinking and different stuff, and like censoring and narrowing that down. It's kind of just trying to build like a whole group of like-minded people, which is not fun.
Yeah. I also think the great fear here is that throughout history, the hallmark of an authoritarian nation, how you can tell things have gone bad, is that they're restricting speech. They're restricting art. People's most common example of a dictatorial state, Nazi Germany, Nazi Germany had a bureau dedicated to controlling what art was released, what art wasn't. And if books didn't comply with these ordinances, they'd be burned or banned. The novel All Quiet on the Western Front and its sequel, A Long Road Home, both were banned in Nazi Germany for its anti-war messages. And the fear here is that we are going through this process now. America shouldn't turn out like these other countries, like Napoleon's dictatorship or that of Sulla in ancient Rome, or although I don't often like comparing anything to Nazi Germany because I believe it lessens the impact. Like Nazi Germany.
Well, and that's the thing for me is like, as a country and how we kind of were founded, we were so against this type of, and we fought. I mean, we even fought against that belief in World War II, and now we're just gonna turn it around just because we don't like this point of view. We don't like this perspective. We don't want our children to have any sort of that have any sort of just ability to learn about that topic. We want to just shell them and just cram them into our beliefs. And even if you disagree with the book's beliefs that's getting banned, someone out there agrees with it and someone out there would learn on it. And even if you disagree, you should read it to get a different point of view so you have a better understanding as a whole. And that's just what doesn't sit right with me and doesn't make sense is we fought against it and now we're doing it.
Yeah.
I think the idea of it even just like happening is really like the main fear. Cause like,
Yeah.
I just like,
It doesn't matter where it's happening. It matters that it's happening. Yeah.
I mean, even in other countries, like just restricting people's voice and message is just should never be allowed.
It's kind of like the people that it's affecting or that are trying to ban it. It seems like an inconvenience to them because it doesn't align with what they like and stuff like that.
Well, I feel like also, especially in like third world countries, like they don't have as much access like to technology, I guess, and like, which I don't know exactly if that's true, but I mean, you just think of like a poor person in general. They have less access to technology and they have less access to like knowledge, because you grab your phone, you can Google whatever you want. Well, you don't have a phone. I mean, even you don't have a phone when you're in, I don't know, third grade. I didn't have a phone in third grade. How did you learn? You learned by a teacher. How did the teacher learn? By a book. Mm-hmm. How do you also learn? A book. And at the root of it, it's by a book. Even online, it's just text.
Yeah.
It's just digital.
And it's kind of a luxury that we have, like, the opportunity to even, like, think about banning books. When in other worlds, like, they struggle to even get books or just have, like, proper books and all that kind of stuff.
And, like, I mean, they don't have the ability to understand different perspectives than we do, and we're just going to throw it all away. Just because we don't like the belief of it. Or we think it's bad for our children. And we just want to be protect. But it's like, then parent what you want. That's your child. But don't
Parent other people.
First of all, understand the risks and the consequences of parenting your child in a crappy way. And second, don't get all egotistical and don't act so superior as to push that on other parents and their children.
Well, it's also like you open the door for book banning. Like, let's just say you have, a book that you personally think really should get banned because it's like, let's just look at the, what was the book Hitler wrote?
Mein Kampf.
Let's just look at Mein Kampf. Like, that book, is it banned in the United States?
You can't ban things in the United States, but in most schools it's banned.
In most schools it's banned. So you ban that book, and then you open up, what about the other perspective? Why can't it be banned? And I'm just, as an extreme. And you go into a more relevant topic, like LGBTQ, or our history about slavery, you ban something in somebody's perspective you don't believe. Well, why is the other one allowed? Just because it's in a different perspective. Mm-hmm. And that's just trying to form a belief and, like, knowledge because you want them to see it your way, which is just not fair. And that's the whole point of our government and freedom is you can decide what you want your belief to be, and you, like anything. Just...
Wasn't there, I don't know if it was, like, Ellie that was talking about this, but a war book that they banned the perspective of it from, like, the soldier who wrote about it, but then, like, they kept it from, I think someone who wrote about it from, like, an outside perspective, I think. I don't know.
I thought it was about slavery, wasn't it?
It was...
Slavery was different. It was a war
There was
thing.
slavery, and then there was a war thing, and then woman. It was something with women.
Handmaid's Tale. did
Yeah,
get
it was
banned,
Handmaid's Tale, yeah.
which is terrible. That's not only a classic, but why are you banning that?
Yeah, because it was, like, I think she talked about how it was, like, two books writing about the same thing, but they didn't like the perspective of one of the books, so they banned it, and they kept the perspective of the other book because they liked how it kind of explained it, which is kind of just, like, again, them trying to, like, shape our thoughts and stuff. When someone's, like, one book's giving, like, the raw, like, real stuff that happened, and then one book's giving, like, a little bit of a sugar-coated version, it's just like them trying to, like, sugarcoat history, sugarcoat, like, terrible things happening around the world too.
You're trying to whitewash.
Yeah, whitewash it.
And that's what, like, for me is, like, I understand having both of them but I feel like people need to have the option because me personally, I would want the root and the real and, like, just so I understand where they came from and what happened, like, what really, really happened. And, I feel like, yeah.
And, we do comparative assignments in school, like, all the time, where we compare books or we compare works, we compare poems or something like that. But then how are we supposed to do that if they're only giving us, like, the, like, sugar-coated, whitewashed version of it compared to, like, the real, true version of it?
We have 5 minutes.
All right. So, our point at the end of the day, what's our point?
That our point is kind of, we want to, like, inform you guys about book banning, what's happening, and that you have a voice to, like, speak out against it, and just, like, let them know that you see it, speak up, and make your voices heard, because a lot of this is being controlled by adults, but it's affecting the youth and the teens. So to make sure we just, like, speak up, have a voice, go to board meetings and all that kind of stuff.
The point behind what they're doing, that they're banning one book at a time, although it isn't really one book at a time, the reason that they're starting with school boards and city councils instead of going state level or federal is because they're hoping we don't notice. I say show them that we do. We do see it.
Yeah.
And I think a big thing to look at a different picture of it is they're trying to shape what you can understand and what you can learn and what perspectives you can take in. And even if it's not a prevalent issue in your city, it is something that we need to fight for and understand. So if and when it does happen, that you understand how big of an issue it is and why we should fight for it.
It is terrible enough that we have spent the past 40-some minutes trying to give a reason why book banning is terrible. Intrinsically, it's terrible. It is immoral. It is unethical. We shouldn't need to give a reason. This should be a 1-minute episode, but it's not.
And yeah, just like to give the audience just a better understanding on what it is, because coming into this I had no idea. I just thought, oh, we just threw books in fire, but it is such a big issue that's underlined every day.
And it has been like a topic that has come up here in Lee Summit. Like, if you just think it's happening like everywhere else, it has been brought up in Lee Summit about books that they want to ban in our schools and in our curriculums and stuff. So it's important to like make sure you're doing your research and talking to your teachers or students about it as well.
Yeah. This has all been great. This has been I Can Relate. Thank you all for watching. I've been Charlie.
I'm Connor.
And I'm Maieva.
Thank you all, and have a great night.